Hi, everyone. Good evening. Welcome back to the webinar series here at Tombolo Research. I'm glad to have you here for another week. Hi to Shay, Sweetie, and Ali. Thank you guys for joining me again. You were here every session, so thank you for coming back every single time. I appreciate you. And if you are joining us, feel free to drop where you're joining us from. And also, what you're looking forward to. Are you interested in robotics? Do you already maybe work in robotics? Let me know where you're joining us from and what you've been doing along the way. In the meantime, Sweetie says it's morning in Bermuda. Well, it's evening here in Dubai. So today's topic is all about ethics in robotics. So let's talk about ethics in robotics. A little bit of housekeeping. The last time I saw you guys, we were talking about agentic AI and looking at how when you're using these autonomous systems, how can you implement them properly? What are the different types? And you had a lot of questions, actually so many questions that I didn't get to finish answering them all. So let me answer a few more of the ones that got left behind. And then we'll hop into today. So someone asked, when should you not use agentic AI? Like, is there any time when agentic AI may not be very useful for you in your use case? Well, I like to think that when the stakes are quite high, any decisions that it makes can't be like reversed, or you need to make sure that you are like the person and you're taking charge, then I think maybe you should skip using agentic AI and focus on using a person for that kind of job instead. The next one was, how do you know if something is actually agentic AI and not just an automation? So basically, an agentic AI is able to make decisions by itself. So you really don't need to give it too much input. It's able to use either the tools that you gave it or some of the context to really answer and do things for itself. So an automation just follows the same pattern every time. So it can't really handle any changes. Like even the tiniest change can make it just fall out of place. Whereas an agentic AI is the one making decisions and deciding on the patterns for itself. And then we also talked about education a lot in the last session, which I really enjoyed. So somebody asked, what skills should students learn that AI really can't replace? So again, we talked about AI being a thinking partner. It can't replace, you being able to answer questions for yourself. It can't replace, how you think through a problem or how you like approach different things like an English essay. Because the way that I may love Shakespeare is going to be completely different to how you like Shakespeare, for example. So as a student, what skills should you learn? Continue looking at problem solving, your critical thinking skills, and learning how to use the system more as a partner rather than a replacement for things. As a reminder, these webinar series are hosted by my startup, Tombolo Research. We are an AI and robotics startup based here in Dubai with our first product launching this summer. I can't tell you what it is, but I do hope that you'll join us for the journey. And as I continue to drop little hints as we keep going through the webinars, if you'd like to learn more, please head to our website, tomboloresearch.ai, and you can keep up with all the other topics we'll be having. The next one is a webinar that I am personally excited by because we'll be talking about women in STEM. And I have Hannah Klaus joining us for that. So she is currently a PhD candidate at the University of Cambridge, and she'll be joining us to talk all about AI and ethics around like for women in STEM and also just really AI in general. So I'm excited to have her. And as the months goes on, we'll be looking at world models. So this is a big thing that Jan LeCun kind of started, looking at why are we just using LLMs when we should be looking at AI that can really understand the world on a physical level. Later in March, we'll be looking at AI and robotics in healthcare, and then AI in the classroom. So if those are some topics that interest you, be sure to head to my website to register, and you'll be on the mailing list for when we release those registration links. Looking forward to seeing you there. Okay, let me go back and check on the chat in case anybody said anything here. Sweetie said that we're huge fans. And Shay said it's afternoon in London, and Ali also evening in Dubai. Love robotics, love robotics. Looking forward to the summer launch. Me too. Okay, let's hop right into today's topic. So, I don't know about you, but when I think about robotics, these two are like the first ones that I think of. Because my grandfather, the late Kenyatta Young, was super into Star Wars. And so when I was growing up, this was the series that we just had to watch together. This and old Western movies as well, but the Star Wars is the one that really stuck in my mind. So in case you don't know, if you don't know, go watch the movie. But this is C3PO and R2D2, and they were like, my favorite robots so far. Does anybody else have any favorite robots? Any ones I'm missing on the slide? My sweetie says she's a huge Star Wars fan. So yeah, he introduced that series to both of us. So we're huge fans. So let's talk about what a robot actually is, because there's a lot of talk around it's a robot, but you don't really know what it is and what does a robot actually mean. So basically, a robot is a device really that has sensors, actuators. If you're not sure what an actuator is, that's something that helps with the movement. That could be a motor or a servo, something like that. The robot's able to do decision making and also interact with different humans and also its environment. So if you think about these two, they're always getting into trouble, but they have their own little motors being able to walk. So C3PO is a humanoid. His actuators allow him to walk on two legs. And then there's R2, who he just rolls around and does his thing. So all of these things, they have their own sensors, whether that be a camera or I think R2 had a torch at one point. So there's different things you can add to them to really get them to be as exciting and interactive as they are. But on a basic level, a robot's really just something that has sensors and actuators. It's able to make decisions for itself, whether that be just an algorithm or a full-blown neural network AI system. And it's able to interact with humans and its environment to complete a task or to do whatever you wanted it to do. Checking on the chat here. Yeah, BB-8 is also very cute, but he's not the original, so I didn't include him in this slide. So let's talk about robotics around the world. So in 2024, there were 4.66 million industrial robots in use worldwide. And that is a huge number. I tried to look for 2025 and 2026, but those stats haven't quite been released yet. So we're gonna have to wait and see what comes out. Just give me 1 second. I just wanted to change the chat. I'm here making gestures and you guys can't really see me. So now I've just added myself with a little bubble in the corner. Okay. So these are some of the industries where robotics is being used right now. You can see them in healthcare, in logistics, manufacturing, hospitality, and also in the home, in assistive kind of tech. So at the top here, I've put some of the KUKA robots. That's the company that does a lot of industrial robotics. And what you can do with those is they're these huge industrial arm robotics. And they're able to make things like cars and really whatever you ask them to do. And the cool thing about these is that you can actually design the tip or the actuator to do whatever you like. So for example, these ones are assembling a car, but you can change that part to be able to do whatever it is that your task is going to be. This one down here is a cute little cat robot being used in a restaurant. And I actually got to meet a robot like this. His name was Plato at a conference back in, I think it was Cannes, in the WAICF. And they had these walking around and you could get them to follow you. So it was really cute. So can you imagine being a waiter in the restaurant and then you're like, oh, let me just go and get my friend here. The robot will just follow you around. It's pretty fun, pretty cool. So ethics in robotics is not the same as ethics in AI. Because if you remember, our first webinar was all about ethics in AI. So we were looking at when these AI systems are being deployed in the world. But what happens, because that's all software, right? If you leave your computer somewhere, the AI is not going to come with you. But having a robot is a whole different game, because at that point, you're bringing something into the physical world. So it's not just AI on a computer screen. This is AI that you can touch and interact with, which is completely different. So the rules also have to change along with that to really accommodate that. So when you talk about robotics and ethics, you're not only talking about how the systems work with a human, on a software level. This is now going into the physical world. So you're not only with humans on the computer, but they're actually in your space, in your world. So that completely changes how we have to look at regulating these and also looking at the governance and things around it. It's completely different, and the privacy as well. You can leave your computer in the other room, but if your robot assistant comes with you into the room, well, that brings the AI with you, and that changes a lot. So I have some case studies that I wanted to go through. Oh, I heard that the word robot originates from the Czech word robota, which means slavery, labor, or something forced to work. I think that might actually be true, I do remember hearing that somewhere. You're not wrong. I wanted to go through a couple of case studies. I have 4 to go through with you today. So the first one I wanted to look at is autonomous delivery systems. I apologize, the double text, I didn't catch that one. Just a little typo there. But when we're looking at these autonomous delivery systems, you're looking at things like, like you've probably heard of these like drones. That's interesting from the irony of it as well. Yeah, it is, especially because we are kind of forcing them to work. And there's a whole nother conversation around that I won't focus on today. So in this case, I'm looking at like autonomous delivery systems. So we can look at things like these robots that are able to roll around on the sidewalks. That's the first one I have. This one is here with Uber Eats. And then like Amazon and different companies, especially in China, like Alibaba, have these delivery drones. So I want to talk a little bit more about what does it mean when you have these robots that are in the sky and also just like walking around in the same places as we are. Like, for example, you have these delivery robots on the sidewalk versus the delivery robots that are in the sky. So more on looking at this from an ethical perspective of how do we make sure that they are interacting with people, especially because, people are unpredictable. Robots are supposed to be predictable, but people are, we do some interesting things. And it's hard for a robot to be able to predict all of that. So I think that this one is quite interesting because it's almost on the same level as a self-driving car. But I would say even more so, it has to be much more careful because you're going like directly up to people as well. So looking at going to their homes, because it will give you that address, and also going with people's packages. So there's another privacy aspect in terms of that as well. I don't know if anybody has actually seen any of these delivery robots in person, but I just went to a conference called Machines Can Think in Abu Dhabi. It was on Monday. And there's a company here called Yango that's actually testing out these little delivery driver robots. It's very similar to the one on the top right corner. And they're testing it out, but on a flat surface. So they're right now, these ones that the Yango company has, they can't go on stairs, but it's still pretty interesting to see how those work. Okay, now this one I found to be one of the most interesting cases. So has anybody heard of the Neo robot? This one just came out, like I think about either a month or a couple of months ago. They released it, and I think they're open for pre-order right now. I don't know if anybody else has seen it somewhere. But these robots are a part of the category that I like to call the humanoid home assistants. So this is probably like the closest to C3PO that I've seen in real life. So looking at having a robot that works with you in the home, able to do chores for you, and it's supposed to just be able to like an at-home butler. And I think that goes back to what the Czech word that Ali had mentioned, looking at like something that's forced to work. So having somebody like a robot in your home that does your chores and just kind of takes care of the house for you, opening doors and things like that. But with this specific company, what I found especially interesting was that not only is it cloud connected, but it's also collecting data from the home to use to train the rest of its robots. So it's not just using the data that the company has. It's deploying the robots not only for that, but also to collect data and train future robots, which opened up a whole nother ethical consideration. So Shan said, yes, it's creepy. It's creepy looking with the eyes. Yeah, I agree. It's a little bit uncanny. So yes. So looking at that, and then looking at, for example, also these were going to be teleoperated. So if anybody's not sure what teleoperation means, it means that the robot is being controlled by another person. So the person's not in your house, but they're controlling the robot from a remote location. So that opens up another can of worms of when you're using these robots, not only is the robot like learning data from your house, using the sensors, using the cameras, it's collecting data. The company did say that it's able to blur out faces, but personally, I'm not sure if that's quite enough to really keep the people feeling safe and being ethical, just to blur a face, because there's a lot of things that could be unblurred, and I don't know. I'm not super comfortable with that. You guys can let me know what you think about having a teleoperated robot where somebody in a remote location is able to control a robot that's inside of your home. Personally, I don't feel comfortable with that, and I think that opens up a lot of different, not only ethical but also privacy concerns. So this robot was interesting. I think it's ready for pre-order now, and it'll be arriving either this year or early next year. Yeah, it's human operated, and it records and shares your data with the company. Yeah, to train the next generation, which is quite interesting and also a little bit scary. So Sweetie says, no, not interested in this. It looks taller than me. See, I didn't say that, you said that. And it's like how you can program your washer and drying machines remotely. Yeah, but instead of you programming them, you have like the little robot will be able to do these tasks for you. So this is a privacy ethical nightmare. Yeah. So I went for one of the extreme cases first, because this is one of those reasons where you have to think, how far do we want to take the innovation in favor of how far do we want to take innovation in comparison to keeping it private and keeping data safe? Because for me, for example, I wouldn't want to deploy something like this into people's homes. Why would a robot need to be controlled by someone? Just hire someone. So yeah, exactly. So it's also going back to what we discussed in the last session. We were looking like, do you actually need agentic AI? Like, is there a reason that you would buy this robot rather than just hiring somebody? And so it doesn't really sense, especially because there's still a human involved because the robot hasn't fully been trained. Exactly. Keep the human to do the work. Completely agree. So this is definitely a hot topic. So there's other robots like this, other companies that are coming along, but this was like the first one that I saw, and I wanted to bring it to this session today. So case study 3. So we're looking at healthcare robots. There's a lot of different variations of this. Like I personally, my aspiration is to be, a surgeon and get into robotics engineering. So it's interesting to see how many of these robots are actually being deployed now in hospitals and different healthcare clinics. I don't know if I'm allowed to move my little bubble. No, I can't. Okay, I'll go full screen. So what I wanted to show you was the one on the bottom. I actually got to meet these robots. They're from a really cool company. That oh my goodness, I'm blanking on the name of. One moment, let me just grab the name of that robot really quickly. Right. The company is called Enchanted Tools, and this is one of their robots called they call them the Mirokai. These ones are interesting because they have a whole storyline around them, like a whole cartoon going on, and they're able to interact with not only people but also children really like them because they look like characters. If you've ever seen, for example, have you heard of the topic about uncanny valley? So for those of us that are working in robotics, we've all heard about this uncanny valley, where the more human a robot looks, the more uncomfortable people get with seeing it. So a lot of the robots today either look like animalistic characters, or they try to make them look very much like a robot and not as much like a person. So on that side, you're trying to make sure people feel comfortable when you're bringing these robots in. That's one of I would consider that an ethical consideration, making sure that people feel comfortable when they're using the robots and not like it's like, a random robot in your house. Like it feels a bit like fearful and almost scary. Let me hold on and go back to the chat here. Shay says, human operated humanoid equals a puppet. Yeah, at that point, you might as well just hire someone. How soon do you think this will happen when robots no longer need to be controlled by humans? So that's actually something that I was hoping to discuss in our future workshop where we're talking about the world models, because I think that that's where this kind of thing becomes really interesting. So how long do I think it will happen? Before I used to say like a decade, but at this point I'm thinking like 5 years, but this is completely like an estimate, because when people like Jan LeCun, also NVIDIA, start to develop things like world models. If you've ever heard of NVIDIA Omniverse, that's another tool that NVIDIA has developed where you're able to simulate an environment and train the robot there. So rather than having the robot in the real world, you're able to train it on a lot of different data in the simulated world. And then that way the robot's able to learn without you having to bring it to the actual environment. It's able to train and do different things before you bring it to the real space. So in that case, when it comes to the training of things, it'd be better. I think it'd be about 5 years, considered like probably maybe even a little bit sooner for some of them, because we already have self-driving cars and autonomous delivery robots. So I don't think it's that far off at all. So these ones are interesting. So I wanted to bring it into the healthcare side. So you can let me know. Do you think that you would feel comfortable having a robot nurse? So for example, the robot on the top, this is a robotic nurse. So it's meant to help, bring the nurses your medicines. It has a little grabber where it's able to do like different cleaning tasks, like placing things around. This is really interesting. The two on the bottom, so this is from Enchanted Tools. They have different tools that they can have. So they have like little bars that they can hold shelves, or they can bring around different like rolly, I guess a rolly bin is what you would call it. So they can really help. They don't really interact with people so much, but they do like tasks around the hospital, like carrying things for you and bringing things to different rooms. But they're like animalistic characters, so they also kind of like interact in the way that you can like touch them and they react. It's pretty interesting, like a companion, but for the healthcare field. Shay says, I really like where healthcare robotics is going, especially handling ultra hygienic tasks and routine procedures so staff can focus more on complex care and direct patient support. Exactly. So personally, I'm really interested in this topic. So how do we make robots that are integrating in the healthcare field space while keeping people, comfortable and also making sure that you're supporting them in a way that isn't too invasive, because healthcare is a very, very sensitive topic. So when you're bringing robots into that space, I think you have to be really, really quite careful. One second, just wanted to double check. Shane says, I think in a robotic nurse, in terms of a general chore-like task, I wouldn't want a robot to defib me if one of the paddles on my face by accident. So yeah, you definitely wouldn't want the robot to be able to do that. But the more that we get to train these things, like I think, sweetie, you asked before, like how soon do you think it'll be that these robots are not controlled by humans? So the more you try to put them into these environments, they're learning as well while you put them in these environments. So, maybe the next time, hopefully, when you get them to start doing things that are automatic like that, we'll get to that Star Wars level of, you go in and the robot nurses are keep taking care of you. I don't know. How soon and how far is that? How far away is that? Sweetie says, maybe because I'm an island woman and we're used to our healthcare providers being in person, I don't want to have a robot handling my healthcare in the name of efficiency. I mean, I agree. I do think that certain nominal tasks, like some more easier tasks, like carrying things around or handing things to nurses, I think is not too bad in the name of efficiency. Especially in elderly care centers where your places are short staffed, I think it would be interesting to bring in a robot like this to help out. Not necessarily interacting with patients, but more just as a support for different nurses and things. The idea of using a robot, Shay says, Ali, sorry. I agree to the idea of using robots for regular tasks that don't include critical decisions. Yeah, just not very basic tasks, I think would be interesting. I'm just double checking the LinkedIn people are okay, because I can't see them over here. Thank you. Cool. Just checking. Okay. I had one more case study I wanted to go through with you, because I feel like so far we've been kind of looking at a little bit of the doom and gloom of things. So when you bring in robots, like I said, they're coming into our world and not just on the software side. Now you can actually physically interact with them a bit more. So what I wanted to talk about first, another example as a case study, was this one. So this is the Dawn Avatar Robot Cafe in Tokyo that I got to meet some of the robots when I was at VivaTech last year. And it was, the year before last, my goodness, because we're in 2026. So the year before last, I went to VivaTech and they had this little robot here on the desk. So I don't know if you can see her. She has a little kimono on. Her name was Kotonoha. She's very sweet, but I didn't realize that it was a person actually piloting the robot. So this was a really lovely case where robotics isn't being used to replace people. Instead, it's enabling them. So all of the robots in the cafe are remote controlled by what they call avatars or pilots. And the pilots are all people that have severe disabilities and that they are meant to stay at home. So they're not actually able to go out and work, whether that be muscle disabilities or whether that's something more mental health related. But through the robots, they're able to work and also get paid while they're working in this cafe. So when I got to meet with them, she was very sweet. And she was kind of telling me more about the project. And I just think that this is a great example of robotics, ethics, but on a more positive side of things. So rather than replacing people, it's actually enabling them to come out of their homes and then get some more work done and also be a bit more integrated into society. So I think that this is a really interesting one, and it's pretty cool. So you see, Shay said, I saw this before, and I'm really interested and supportive of this idea, especially to enable severe disabilities and homebound to be able to earn a living. Yeah, so I think that this one in particular is quite a great opportunity, especially for the people here, because it's using robotics to solve a very deeply, I would say, human problem. So being isolated and excluded, but in this case, they're using the robotics to do things the design here doesn't seem to be like efficiency. So they're not just using the robots to be efficient. It's all about inclusion, dignity, and also connection, because you're able to interact with them and talk with them, so they can talk to you without being worried about being judged or being stuck at home. So it's a really great initiative. And I recommend that you look more into it if you haven't already. This is a great one. So it's called the Dawn Avatar Robot Cafe, and it's in Tokyo. So maybe one day we'll all go visit. It's pretty cool. Okay, I'm just checking if anybody said anything over here, but just in case anyone on LinkedIn, come to the YouTube. The comments seem to be a bit easier for me to see from there. Okay, let's keep going. So when we talk about building ethically, especially in robotics, there's more of a practical approach that I think we should take. So for example, in the design phase. So a lot of people, when they go for robotics and they talk about, just wanting like, oh, let's just build this robot because it'll be super useful. They're more focused on efficiency and, looking at replacing things and looking at automation. But when you design things in an ethical way from the start, that can completely change your perspective. So think about the problem first. Like, for example, like the humanoid robot. Do you really need to have a humanoid robot helping you at home? Not really. You can just hire someone if you're able to afford a humanoid robot. So think about how you're designing these and looking at whether or not a robot is actually needed. And if it is, then make sure that you implement these ethical decisions from the beginning. Sorry, I missed a couple of things here. So back to the previous slide. She said it looked like a good idea. And she said, it seems we really have to think how far we want to go with robots in our comfort level. I feel like they're studying us. Well, yeah, that is kind of the great part of robotics, is that it's all very data-based. So in a way, they are studying us. But it's a matter of what do we want to allow them to study? Because I think one of the quotes, I can't remember who that's from, but if you're not in the data set, then unfortunately you'll be left out of it. So what parts of us do we want to include in there to make sure that the robots are able to treat us, ethically, and that we're able to connect with them and work with them in a way that's I guess augmentative for us and also very useful, like the Robot Cafe, for example. Shay says, my question would be how well developed the robot itself is, being able to correct itself in its path without being obstructed or preventing any spills. That's a great question, actually. It'd be interesting to learn more about that. Ali says he loves that we're discussing the positive and negative sides. Thank you. Me too. Happy to see both of the sides. Oh, thank you, sweetie. So yeah, to the design phase of things. Okay. So after that, when we get into development. So again, when we looked at the agentic AI, we talked about things like, for example, human in the loop. So when you're designing these robots, how autonomous do you want them to be? So for example, a delivery robot, you want it to come to the house and not, just leave the package there and then go away, because, packages get stolen, they get damaged. So you want to make sure that there's a human in the loop for that. But on the autonomous side, you want it to be able to direct itself to the house without, hitting any obstacles or any people along the way. So again, the development phase, like how is that data being stored? Because if your robot has a camera, for example, or a microphone, then you're able to listen in on people's private conversations, or you're able to see things that maybe they wouldn't want you to see. So when you're developing, you have to be thinking about, how do I develop this in a way that I'm protecting people's data and that, I'm really following through with the values that people are trusting me to have. So Ali says, exactly, most people mention ethics and then only the negative stuff, but it can have a positive side as well. I agree. It's not all doom and gloom, as they say. Okay, let's get to the next little part here. So the deployment phase. So once you deploy the robot, I think I'll put up the next two, actually, because they kind of come together. So once you deploy the robot, then you can't just leave it by itself, for example. Once you deploy it, how is it going to be updated? How will you iterate on that? Will you need a person to come and do maintenance, or is it something that you can just let it go off by itself? So once you deploy it, how will you keep track, and how will you make sure that the users also have a way of giving you feedback? Because what's interesting about robotics and AI that's different from other products and software is that it's it's non-deterministic. It's all there. It's all probability based. Like there's going to be edge cases that you as a team may not have prepared for in the design and development stage. So when you deploy it and you're iterating on top of things, you want to make sure that there's a way for people to let you know what's happening and what the edge cases that they see are, or being able to give the robot feedback and maybe fix different things or customize it. So a lot of things you have to consider as well. So she says, I agree to Ali, and usually they just use and abuse robots without thinking about the values it can provide to the majority that it could also bring positivity to. Thank you. Cafe is a good example. Right. Okay. So let's talk about some of the key ethical concerns. So when we start talking about ethics, what are some of the things we want to look at? So I guess we do have to go back to the negative side, job displacement. So, we already have delivery drivers. We already have people that work in the home to do like different service tasks, like washing the dishes, changing a washing machine. Like we already have people that can do all of these things. So is it, when you're making a robot to fix a problem, is it really you fixing a problem, or are you just, like trying to automate things that maybe a human could continue to do? But unfortunately, as with the previous industrial revolution, when factories and things came about, jobs got replaced. And when you have robotics, that is a very real thing to consider, jobs being replaced. So when you're building these, is it necessary to have a robot in that space? And if it is, can a human still work in the space? Like where do we then go? As when we start to build these robots, where do the humans that were already working there go? To give you a bit of the positive and the negative side. So for example, a lot of robots are able to do jobs that humans physically can't or also shouldn't do for healthcare concerns. Like for example, when you're doing things like factory work, where it might be a bit dangerous for you to be around such heavy machinery, it might be better to have a robot there than a person. Or if you're trying to do some research in more intense environments, like dangerous environments, it may be better to have a robot go ahead and do that for you. When I was at Vivatech, I saw another company, apologies, I'm forgetting the name here, but they were able to use different like drones and tiny robots to go into pipes to look out for like different plumbing issues or like changing water quality that, you as a human, you're not going to have the sensors to tell you how much sulfur or something is in the water, but the robots do. And then they can give you back that information and help you on your job. Sweetie says that's a big concern right now. How do we prepare people for this job displacement? It's a great question, actually. So preparing people for this, I would say, make sure that you are staying on top of it, like stay on top of the news, see where companies are innovating. Are they innovating in your field? If so, how can you get involved? How can you learn more? And just continue to upskill yourself as well. So continue learning. Don't feel stagnant in one place. You can continue to upskill and learn more things. She says, by this, I mean the increased introduction of robots. What skills will people need to stay relevant, older and younger folks? It's a good question also. I would say continue to upskill. Because for example, people may not have really liked calculators a while ago, but now you have them and you can use them in your math problems. So looking at how to integrate yourself with these systems or starting to use them for your own advantage as an employee. So like I said, for example, the water one. So if you're a plumber, maybe you've been in the trade for a long time. My grandfather was a plumber and an electrician. So I can imagine him using a robot on the job to like check water levels, go into the pipes where he couldn't and bring him back the information. Just like continuing to learn what are the different products that are coming out and the different like systems that are being used and how can you use that to, I guess, augment what you already know. Because they're meant to be assisting you rather than replacing you. So just continue to learn more and stay on top of the news, I would say. Okay. Then we can look at things like bias and fairness. So again, a lot of robots all robots depend on data. So but also how they're developed. So as you are developing the robots, make sure that you are considering everyone. So you're not just focusing on one specific group or you're not excluding anyone when you're developing the robots. Make sure that your data set is very representative of the people in the environment that it's being deployed in. I keep going back to Dr. Joy because that's one of my favorite examples. For example, when she was doing her PhD, she was looking at facial recognition. So because her skin was quite dark and it wasn't being represented in the data set, then she obviously so she later wasn't able to be recognized by the robot because it hadn't seen her before. I'll go back really quickly. I'll pause. Robotics is a big pro and con for job displacement. Pro, it could take on dangerous, repetitive work in harsh, toxic environments. Yep, you mentioned that. Keeping humans safer and reducing workplace accidents, 100%. Con, it can replace human roles, especially for routine or manual jobs, risking unemployment and widening skill gaps if reskilling and support are not provided. So yes, so I guess that does go back to the employer and also like a bit of a responsibility on the employer. If you're bringing in robots into your business, make sure that you're reskilling the employees that you have to try to do other things because they were able to do the job for you at one point. So if you're bringing in a new product to do it for them, then make sure that you're reskilling them and keeping that balance. Yes, there we go, Shay. I think a good balance for this is to make the robots more human operated so that it can battle the challenge of jobs being replaced. Agree. Really nice. And then Sweetie says, and as robots increase, will they have a level of sensitivity? No, they're not human. But as they become more integrated in our societies, I fear we'll lose the human connections. So let's pause on that one for a second. So as they become more integrated into our societies, I feel we'll use the human connections. I think honestly that kind of depends on us. So how are we allowing them to integrate in our space? Because some robots may actually be able to really enable us. So for example, robots that speak different languages, you're able to talk with people that you hadn't before, and that might improve your social connection. Or the robot, deferring you to another person, or maybe helping you to integrate more into society, like the cafe that we saw before. So those people used to be, stuck at home and unable to work. But now, by being an avatar pilot, they're able to integrate more with society and actually talk with people and make a living. So it's a bit of quite a nuanced situation. So on one hand, yes, the more robots we have, you're not going to want to talk to as many people, or they might also enable you to become even more involved and integrated into society. So it's a very interesting topic, and I'm curious about this as well. Ollie says, what if the companies that decide to use robots find a way for the people being replaced to work with the robots, for example, monitor them or find corner cases that the robots can't beat and let a real human focus on those? Yeah, I agree. So Shay says, yes, Ollie, I agree. Fully autonomous can have risks where if each stations have human operators to maintain and monitor them, they can again retain jobs and increase robotic workflow efficiency. Yeah, I agree. Oh, we have a LinkedIn comment. How exciting. William, hello. He says, great, good informative session. Thank you. Sweetie says, like a robotic nurse won't recognize my face and that I'm afraid of needles. Actually, funny enough, there's a professor at Queen Mary, actually, where I used to study, who was looking at how to interpret pain using AI. So looking out for different little flinches that you would make as a person, or little sounds that you make, and then getting the robot to understand all of those different cues when it's interacting with a person. So you never know, maybe the robot nurse might recognize by your face that you're afraid of needles or feeling a bit uncomfortable in the situation. So that's all it's interesting. And Cheyenne says there's another case study where people at home are operating heavy construction machinery from home and overseas project. Oh, epic construction projects. Oh, that's actually really cool. I hadn't heard of that. That's nice. Oh, wow. That's what I'm saying, sweetie. Oh, wow. So I was looking at the humanoid robots and how when you have them in the house, the company has said that you're able to block off different areas of the house so the robot can't go in there, and that the teleoperators will have to they'll see you, but your face will be blurred, so they won't be able to recognize who you are. I do still consider that to be a privacy violation because the company has also openly said that they're going to be using the robot to train on your house's data. So whatever task it's doing around the house, it's collecting that data and using it to train future robots. But what's interesting to me as well is that the people who are buying it are not worried about that policy aspect. From what I saw, the owner, I think the founder had said that people don't mind if if they have a robot in their house that's collecting data as long as it's working well for them. So what do you think? Would you rather, I guess, sacrifice your privacy over convenience? And if that's the case, why not just have a person? Because I don't really see the difference between, having a person in your house to do those tasks, and they don't need training. Their algorithm is already set. They don't need you to train them to do these kind of things. So it's not like it's replacing anything revolutionary. No offense, but so would you? I guess let me know. Would you be interested in sacrificing that privacy of being in your house versus having that peace of mind that the robot's just doing little menial tasks, like a robot vacuum? You set those things free; they're not doing anything. But but a whole humanoid that has not only a microphone and a camera, but also different sensors, and it's collecting data about you and your household. I don't know how I feel about that, to be completely honest. And then there are accountability gaps. So when it comes to accountability, we have these robots, we have them working in our homes and, working around the hospitals and different cafes and things. It's all very exciting. Like we talked about the good and the bad, but who's accountable for these things? So we talked a little bit about edge cases. So for example, if you have a robot that you expect to do one thing and then one day it does something else. So I think we might have already seen different articles about, for example, autonomous cars, where when they're driving along that have accidentally caused accidents or have even hit people. So this is what I would consider to be, well, hopefully what the developers would consider to be a like huge tragedy and also an edge case, because you wouldn't expect those things to happen. Well, you would expect them, but you should be training your models to avoid it at all costs. So it's accountability. So is it the driver that's accountable? For example, if you're in an autonomous car, or is it the developer, or like who becomes accountable for these things when the robot does something unexpected, or even tragic, really, if something happens that the robot wasn't supposed to do, or if it risks a human's health or life, who becomes accountable? Cheyenne says, I'm sorry, back into the comments. I think I would not have used my personal data. Sorry, I would not have my personal data to be used for training, especially since both audio and visual data of humanoids are being captured, and we don't want them to capture something inappropriate. Yeah, I completely agree. Can we block the robot from having personal data? Honestly, that depends on the company. Because at the moment, I haven't seen anything that says that you can block what it can hear and see. So currently, no, I don't think that's a thing. If someone told me they're using humanoids at home, to me, that's like being lazy on a subscription. Agree. So again, you can let me know what you think on the accountability thing as well, if you don't mind. So who would be accountable for these things? Would you consider it to be the developer, the person that's using the robot, or do we need to have other kind of legal things in place, different governance, different laws or regulations? I think that all of these are important, but it's also important to consider who's accountable. These are a whole nother conversation. And I didn't want to bring in any pictures for this one, but I would still like to discuss it. Looking at things like, for example, autonomous weapons. This is a whole nother side of robotics, like different drones and things like that. So this is another completely different ethical concern, because once we have these systems that are autonomous and able to do really whatever you as the developer or you as the person building it instructs it to do, of course we have to talk about the autonomous weapons side of things as well. So in that case, there's a lot of huge ethical concerns, but I wanted to bring it up as well, just so we can consider it and talk about it a little bit. Shay says, Kix, I think we can block the data unless the robot is locally powered other than using cloud-based service, then possibly the data isn't shared, but you're never 100% sure. Agree. So if it's on the cloud, I'm not too sure we can block the data. And like, at least not for the robots, I'm not super sure about that. Especially if it's over the cloud, it's a bit more difficult. Sweetie says that she thinks the developer is accountable, and like talking about who's protecting us. That's exactly. So this is why it's important, especially in the robotic space, to have a diverse set of developers and not just people developing from one background, having people from a wide range of ethnicities, a wide range of cultures, and also different, like just like the backgrounds that you study. So people from law, psychology, not only computer scientists and engineers, but people from a wide range. And then also you want to include the people that are going to be using the robots when you're building these systems. So you can't leave out the people that you're trying to get to buy the robot. You should include them in the conversation and talk about it, which is why like I wanted to have this conversation at Tombolo Research, because we are working with robotics and making and trying to launch our own product this summer. So that's something that we also are considering as well, making sure that we are including different people in our data sets and trying to be as representative as possible. And also making sure that we stay ethical as well when we're doing our own development. Ollie says, what if the terms and conditions state that the company isn't responsible if anything goes wrong? Well, that goes back to reading the fine print. So that's a whole nother thing. So these are the key ethical concerns that I think that we as developers should consider, but also the people that are starting to as robotics becomes more integrated into our society. I think this is really important to kind of question companies on and make sure that you understand what are your rights as a person, and also understanding how are they training these robots, what are they meant to do, and then how are they integrating within your life. So these are things that you as a person have the right to ask. Sweetie says, I wouldn't want a robot in a court case. That's a scary thought. Yeah, very scary thought. Agree. Okay, so I'll pause it now. I don't have any more little slides here, but I'll just switch over to the Q&A section. So again, thank you for coming to today's workshop. This is a workshop all about ethics in robotics, hosted by us here at Tombolo Research. So thank you for asking any questions. So as we wrap it up, we just have about 4 minutes left here. I just wanted to know if there's any more questions that you all have around ethics in robotics, or even just robotics in general. If you do want to join us for the next session, so the next one will be on February 11th. Again, we'll be joined by Hannah Klaus. Very excited about this. So she's a PhD candidate at the University of Cambridge. Excited to have her. And you can learn more about what Tombolo Research is doing and follow along for our journey by following us on our social media platforms, things like Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, YouTube. And we also have a Substack now. I should have included that logo, and we're on Facebook. So you can join us on any of your favorite platforms. And of course, follow our website as well, which is where we'll be posting some of our updates. But if you want some more behind the scenes, then better to follow us over on our socials. Oh, I'm missing a couple things in the comments. Let's go back. So Shan says, there was a video going around recently. Oh, I missed it. About a person using an AI lawyer that didn't disclose the use of it to the judge until the day, and the judge was furious and dismissed the use. Oof. Imagine if the robot would also be a judge, Ollie says. Oh, definitely interesting. As it was both. Add you to the mailing list. Don't worry, you're already on there. But if you would like to be added to our mailing list, head to the website, because that's where I usually will send out any upcoming webinars that we're having, or any events and things that we're doing. So be sure to head over there to our website and sign up for our mailing list. You're welcome to the 3DDS. Yeah, but a few comments on LinkedIn. And so Shay says to Ollie, there's a movie coming out called Mercy, where they use an AI judge to predict and convict potential criminals and the murderers, and they have 90 minutes to prove themselves wrong. Ooh, that sounds interesting. That's a pretty cool movie. Must watch. Thank you. Glad you enjoyed the session. So again, you have to join us again for the next one. We'll be having it on February 11th. And again, we'll be joined with a guest with that one. But I would love for you to continue joining us also on Tombolo Research for the journey. As I mentioned, we are launching our first robot product this summer, 2026. They're excited for you to join us for that. So again, can't say too much about what we're working on, but I do hope that you will join us for the journey as we continue, because we're hoping to continue paving the way for other young people in STEM, especially in the robotic space. So if you'd like to learn more about what we do, please head over to our website to support us. We also offer AI consulting services and also robotics as a service. So if that's something that you're interested in or your company needs, be sure to reach out to me at info@tomboloresearch.ai, and I look forward to helping you. So thank you for the session. Very informative, especially the topic of ethics. Thank you. I'm glad you enjoyed it. And I will see you all on February 11th for our next workshop. Have a great evening, everyone. Thank you. Or good morning if you're in Bermuda.